never come back again. It's got a death curse. It's got a death curse.
Drop.
Welcome in to a brand new episode of the Death Curse Club. I am owner-operator Zach Hilton. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Threads, Death Curse Club. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, as well as Spotify. If podcast is your jam, you can watch or listen there. We're there, Death Curse Club. Also, Thrill Me Lounge on Facebook, where you can check out Review It Rob's show, Into the Fog, Core Memory Unlocked, Horror and Metal Grooves, Core Memory Unlocked. I believe you can. We'll see if we'll put up an episode there or not. I don't know. But on this episode, this show, woo, we got a banger of an interview for you. Actor, singer, producer, theater director, and now making her feature film debut, For Sale by Exorcist. We have Melissa LaMartina on the show, and it's a great conversation. We dive deep into the movie and other projects that she has with her husband, Chris, like Beach Creeper, which is a fantastic band. I highly suggest checking them out. They're on Spotify, Amazon Music, all that stuff. You'll see her plug that later on in the interview. But I had a fantastic time talking to her about this film, and I can't wait till you guys can check it out. March 11th, it'll be out on VOD. You can rent or buy, do your thing. But before we get into the interview, let me show you the trailer for the movie, and then we'll talk to Melissa LaMartina.
Our guest this morning is Ms. Susan Price, a real estate agent and certified exorcist.
I'm a certified exorcist. I find houses, cleanse them, and sell them.
Wait, really?
Mostly residential, but I have had some success on the commercial side. These spirits were restless.
This house is haunted.
He did not mention the cemetery in the listing. Y'all see that there? That is black mold. Could be a sign of demonic activity. Or water damage. Either way, it's not good.
Closing costs? We're not selling.
Right, that's not closing. That's closing a gateway to hell, and there is a cost attached to that.
Listen here, Jezebel. By the time we're through with you, you'll be banished to hell and time to work the third shift at the underworld's shittiest Applebee's.
I'm gonna get y'all a great deal on this house.
Do you guys actually believe this weirdo?
We have the one, the only, the wonderful Melissa LaMartina.
Hey, Zach, thanks for having me.
Oh, no, thank you for coming on this show. I got to see this a couple of days ago, and I'll be quite honest, I did not realize how roaring laughing I would do to this film.
Yay, I'm so glad to hear it. Thank you.
You guys knocked this one out of the park, and I think it's going to be a hit. I'm going to be plugging this thing up and down the streets. My first question for you is, I know I've seen you say that this was an idea from a honeymoon that you did 10 years ago, and I was wondering if this has just been an ongoing project for 10 years to get to this point. Like, was it always like a off on, come back to it? Or like, has this been a passion the whole time?
So it's been kind of percolating in the background, you know? So Chris and I went on our honeymoon about 10 years ago. We went to New Orleans. When you're looking at for sale signs down there, there's always a little placard that says whether the house is haunted or not haunted. So that got the conversation flowing a little bit about like, what does it look like for someone to specialize in those haunted houses, you know?
Right.
And then at around the same time, or maybe a little bit later, like Chris started really thinking about how when you see a billboard for a real estate agent, it's never like the houses that they're selling, it's always their face, it's always like a headshot of the real estate agent.
Right.
So like that got him kind of thinking about like, oh, what would it be like to like follow like that person's life? Like this person who's like putting their face out there, like I am the face of whatever this transaction is,
Right.
So he wrote the script back in 2017 when he was just kind of like challenging himself to like write a certain number of scripts over the year, and then started talking to Dredd a little bit. They were aware of him, of course, from WNUF, were fans of his. Was one of those things where it's like, hey, when the right thing comes along, let's all work together. So they got hooked up with some folks out here in Maryland to produce, I think, like 6 movies out here. And so that's when the conversation reignited, like, let's see what Chris has. They don't typically do horror comedies, but like, I think the strength of this idea, they were willing to take a risk on it. So it was 2 Januaries ago. We were living in a hotel for a month because we were having our kitchen renovated. And that's when the ball got rolling on pre-production for this. So Chris and I would go down to like the little happy hour that they had at the hotel every night. We'd read the scripts to each other, made a lot of cuts because once we got the parameters, kind of like the sandbox we're playing in, the budget, they wanted it shot in 15 days of production. So we started just like we cut out whole characters, whole like side plots. And I think it ended up being like a nice lean, like there's like no fat in there. It's just like get in there, like get all the funny stuff and get out.
I think that's a perfect description because there's never a moment in there where you just feel like a scene's gone on too long. I mean, it's shot in a mockumentary style, which I'm just going to give credit for you because I've never seen this. The fact that you said director of the documentary is kind of my favorite thing in the world. No one has the balls to say that, and I loved it.
yeah, and it's funny. Like I love that you said that like scenes don't go on too long because like that was like a little bit of not a concern, but like I was like embracing that like slow sort of discovery because I wanted it to feel real. I wanted it to feel as if you're really following this character into a room for the first time, and whatever happens is, what we catch in real time. So that for me meant like more breathing room in scenes, like maybe a moment is held a little bit longer because we're not sure what's going to happen. And it was something that I feel like I had to get other people used to, maybe, like folks who were giving notes and stuff. And people gave great notes, of course. But like, I was like, trust me, like, because there were notes to like, oh, you can tighten this up, you can tighten that up. And I'm like, commit to the bit. Like, trust me.
Right. Well, I think we've seen a lot of good, television documentaries that linger just enough, and I think you did that for like it kind of plays well into that. Susan feels kind of like a country exorcist Leslie Knope.
Yes.
And I think that's pretty much what I felt the entire time, like someone that you backed the entire movie, that you felt for, and not to give anything away, because once again, this comes out March 11th on VOD, and you can check it out on Apple and Amazon and all the good stuff. But like when the S goes down, it really does make you feel for her, and like, the not, I don't want to say villain of the movie, but there is a particular character in the movie that is shown throughout that you're like, oh God, I don't like this person once they show up.
A little antagonistic, maybe a villain. Yeah.
You had 15 days to shoot this, and again, it's a real estate movie. You go to a lot of real estate in it. I mean, that had to be kind of like nerve-wracking to not only find all the places that you're going, but they are very vastly different. Like there's a farm at one point, there's 2-3 story condos. Like, how did you pull that off?
Yeah, it was crazy. And it's funny because, they gave us 15 days and I was like, well, I'm going to do it in 12.
Oh, wow.
and part of that was because, I knew, particularly because we had a lot of locations, and I wanted to make sure we had that like contingency plan, so that like if stuff went wrong, we weren't like stretched thin. We had extra days to buffer if we needed them, and then it also helped me make sure that like more of the budget showed up on the screen if I was like distributing that budget among 12 versus 15 days. But
Right.
yeah, somebody asked me earlier, on another interview I did, how many locations we had, and I was like, oh, I think like 10 or 12. I went back and counted, and we had 16.
Wow.
Because we had some
Wow.
days, we had one day in particular where we shot 4 locations in one day. And it
Oh
was
my
like
God.
some of the smaller, where we do little
The
dip it.
montage. You're right.
Yeah. So like it wasn't anything that was really involved, but still like that many company moves in a day is totally insane.
Right.
But finding the places we called in some favors, one of Chris's old bandmates, we used his house for the succubus house. 2 of our really good friends, their living room, we didn't have to do anything to it to make it the goth couple's house. Like we just like plugged into there. The most challenging one was finding the house with the graveyard, because I really wanted to find a house that actually did overlook a cemetery. And, Chris would say like, oh, we can like do that movie magic, like we can
Right,
shoot
right.
this
Shot of
direction
that,
and then
shot of
do
that.
whatever. Exactly. And I was like, no, I want her to be able to stand on the porch and look at the cemetery. So I
Right.
flyered like 50 or 60 houses, had people, had one person who called me back the house we ended up using, invited us into her home. We ended up sitting and like drinking wine with her and chit-chatting. And then when we showed up for production, she and her husband just left for the day. House
Oh,
full of
wow.
strangers. And they're like, okay, well, if you need us, there are our numbers. You kids have fun, It was
Oh
wild.
my God. It's kind of like the old couple in the movie that you
I know.
have.
It's like, yeah, whatever, go with the flow. And then some
That's
places,
crazy.
we took a more traditional tactic of like finding a couple places via Airbnb and like connections that we had
Right.
with folks. So yeah,
But
we shot the motel scenes actually at the same place we shot motel scenes for Call Girl of Cthulhu, which was the movie that
oh,
Chris and I met making, and we made that, gosh, 12 years ago now or something. And so
oh
we
my
were like,
God.
oh, we come back. Like,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. So I mean you guys have just been just working together ever since being together.
Yeah, basically. Yeah,
Wow, that's
yeah.
pretty
We have
great.
a band together. We were in a surf rock band called Beach Creeper. It's about monsters and cryptids. So our
Oh my
songs are
God.
about like Dracula going to the beach and stuff like that. So
I'm into this.
yeah,
I need this.
we're on Spotify. You can look us up. Yeah. So we do
Okay.
that, like all the movie projects. We're getting ready to shoot a feature in 4 days in
Oh my
April,
gosh.
because Chris turns 40, and he was like, I'm gonna shoot a feature in 4 days to celebrate. So that's what we're doing.
Wow, I ran 3 miles to celebrate mine. Sure, do a 4-day shoot on a whole movie. Sounds
Right?
right.
Yeah,
Oh
we're
my
insane.
gosh. So was the movie always going to be horror comedy? Like you're coming off very funny, obviously, and am I right that you're in this movie?
Yes.
Yeah,
In
you're
For
the
Sale.
couple.
Yeah,
You're
Chris
the
and I are the
couple.
couple. Yes,
That's
we're
what
the
I
couple.
thought.
Which, it was funny that day because that scene is utter chaos. I
Oh, I
mean,
loved it. It's my favorite.
but it's so funny and it's utterly chaotic. And I remember like in the middle of filming that scene, I was like, I don't have any clue what's going on direction wise, because I'm like in it. I'm like surrounded by it. I'm like, I think this is going well. This feels right to me, but I'm like, I don't know what this looks like at all. Like I really had to rely on my assistant director for that scene in particular. And I love it. I think it turned out so well. And like, she has really good eyes, but I was like, this was probably like not a good idea to be in the most chaotic scene of the movie.
I don't know because I think that scene plays very well with you two, your dynamic. And I caught that it was you two. I told my wife, I was like, I think that's her and
Yeah.
her man. So he does a hilarious bit that happens at the end when he says amen. Not going to give it away. I caught it, laughed, and that's when I thought, was this movie always a comedy? I mean, you have a love of horror. I mean, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, our work and Chris's work before he and I got together and I started, producing stuff with him has always been horror comedy. He's never really like tracked in like more serious stuff. It's always been horror comedy. And so like, he had that sort of established, like, for lack of a better term, brand. And so when I came along, like, just sort of like kept going with that. So
Wow.
yeah. So it's always
That's
kind of
pretty
been
rad.
a little, the dual like release of tension, right? Of like screaming
Right.
and laughing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's honest to God my favorite kind of genre in the horror genre, like Evil Dead and stuff like that. That's my Jimmy Jam. So the occult stuff though, in the credits it says that you guys did a lot of research for that. Is this like true?
So the credits were so fun to write because I wrote the opening credits so that it would look like it's a documentary. So I was like,
Right.
let's see, what do we call our writers? Chris and Rob. Ooh, occult researchers. What do I call my costume designers? Ritual garment preservation,
Yes.
spirit channeling for the actors. Like, because I
Right.
wanted it just like from the very first moment, like until obviously the final credits roll and you get everyone's like actual roles.
Everybody's
I want
actuals.
you to
Right.
feel like when you start it, you're in the world, like you're
Wow.
immersed. This is real.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
From like
And
how you said you directed a documentary, so it
right.
all flowed in together. God bless, you're amazing. You got this
And then
down.
funny. Yeah, we did an advanced screening at Midsummer Scream out in Long Beach, California, and our friend Jim, who runs Cinematic Void out there, did the Q&A, and we were like, okay, treat it like it's real, at least at first. So he asked us questions like, so where did you find Susan and all this stuff, and I was like, yes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Oh my God, that's great. So later on in the movie and throughout, there are cool practical effects that are done. And I think what you did very nicely is it's subtle through the movie until it goes batshit crazy. Did you have a certain person in mind to do like makeup for certain demons, demonics, and such? Like, was that hard to get, or trusted person came in?
Yeah, like one of the really great things about making movies in Baltimore is that we are in this like incredibly rich creative scene. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like we knew like immediately like, oh, we can have this person do this person do that. And so Sierra, who is our production designer, did a lot of that work. And then we brought in another makeup artist for Miss Evie when things happened to her. And then also for our last minute people who show up later in the movie. They're very
Right.
distinctive makeup.
Oh yeah.
Not to give anything away. But if
Mm-hmm.
you look really closely at the drummer in that
Mm-hmm.
band, you will note that it is Chris making his second appearance in the movie.
Wow. Oh man, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Um yeah, no, you guys, it seems like a nice like knit team that you guys got going. And the cast is so wonderful, from Susan to the priest. Priest was my favorite character in the whole thing. I loved everybody. Does This was your first directorial debut, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So my first feature, I've directed a lot of
right.
theater. Chris and I co-directed. I wrote the narrative for a video game series called Amanda the
Amanda the
Adventurer that
Adventurer,
Brad
right.
also put out. And so Chris and I co-produced and directed the live action stuff that's in there. But yeah, my first feature. But I brought in a lot of my theater actors, people I'd
Yeah.
worked with in theater, and that was very intentional because of the nature of the movie, and again wanting to maintain that documentary feeling. I wanted to know that my actors were coming prepared off book, that we
Mm-hmm.
could go through an entire scene and just literally follow them. So
Mm-hmm.
I brought in people who are used to doing that on stage, having to know the
Right.
entire script start to finish, which is
Right.
not typical for a film actor because you're dipping into something that's like later in the movie, and then the next day you're shooting the first page, and you don't really need to
Right.
maintain that thread at all times. So that was really important to me.
So did you shoot it from opening to end?
No, we
Or
didn't do not to that level, but
okay.
just being able to like go and do a scene and know like, hey, if we start on the first page of the scene and do like all 3 pages of it, you could do it, and we're not like,
Wow.
okay, we're just doing your close-ups and you only need to know those little bits of lines.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Do you feel directing theater is I mean harder than directing a movie, because I feel like live does give this different kind of like feeling, like anything can happen, where
Yeah.
you get to say cut, do it again. Is it two completely different monsters?
I mean, I feel like it is really different in that, for a play, it's like you at all times are kind of in like a wide shot, because
Right,
it's like you're
right.
seeing everything all at once. So like you have different ways to like draw attention to moments that you really want the audience to pay attention to in theater, whether that's through lighting or like your staging and bringing someone closer to them, further downstage and stuff like that. But really, like you said, there's like that energy, and it's like there's so much that's like happening between the audience and the actors that like when I direct theater,
Hmm.
when the show opens, I'm like, this belongs to you guys now, like I've done my part in imparting my vision to you, and we've
Right.
worked with characters and all these relationships. But once it opens, it's like it often evolves, like depending on like what the energy is on a given night. And so in film, what's interesting is like you just have like a different level of control,
Hmm.
where you can like you're telling the audience, you're like, no, look here now,
Right. Right.
in a really sort of physical sense. And like you said, you can say cut and do it again. And then really a lot of the storytelling then happens in the edit, because it's
Hmm.
like you're picking and choosing all of these moments rather than in
Right.
theater where it's like what happens is what happens.
Wow.
So it's cool. It's
Yeah.
cool to bounce between those two different modes of storytelling, I think.
Well, and looking at what you have the adventurer, you have theater, you have movie. Like you have your band. Like you have been in every stream of art
Yeah.
known to man. Do you have a favorite so far?
I think, and I haven't done theater in a long time, and I
Hmm.
really miss it. I do really
Hmm.
miss that energy and that like, I mean, film is also collaborative, but theater, like that sort of in the moment collaboration, it's so different, and just like feeding off of an audience's energy is
Right.
just such a special kind of thing, and I do really miss that. So I think it's time
Oh, I'm
to
sure.
go do some theater again.
Time to get back. Oh my gosh, we're
Yeah.
going to see the live version of
Yes.
The Exorcist.
It's funny because we talked about, because before we decided, like, this was the movie to make with Dread, we,
Hmm.
when we were talking about, like, do we make this ourselves? One of the things we talked about was like sending Emily, who plays Susan, like out
Hmm.
to conventions and stuff to do like
Oh wow.
PowerPoint presentations of like how to sell a haunted house or like some of her stories, and like kind of like adding like a theater kind of immersive element
Right.
to it,
Right.
which I
It,
think
it
would be
brings
really
that
fun.
Blair Witch kind of feel. Like,
Right?
is it
Like this is
real?
all real. Yeah.
Right.
Like, oh no, I saw Susan Price talk at this convention. She's a real lady.
Right. Right. Speaking of two things about Susan. One, Susan Price. Is it a nod to Vincent Price?
Oh yeah. So like anytime you read one of Chris's scripts, like every name is a nod. And it's
God.
usually like like movies will kind of like collect like different little sets of people. Like it'll be like, oh, like super hyper regional, like shot on video guys, like all of their last names will be like the characters' last names, you know. So there's
Right.
like a lot, like every character he names is always
Wow. No, wow. And the dialogue for Susan, she had maybe 142 like references, like, you know, and make a cockroach whimper or something like that. Like, how'd you find all these?
so like a lot of those are not real. a lot of
Yeah.
those are like where it was just like Chris and Rob would be like, what's something that sounds really weird that like we think a Southern lady would say? And Emily is from Louisiana, and when she first saw the script, she was like, hey, some of these are absolutely ridiculous and I will not say them. Like there's one when she's at the farm and she says about like ghosts, she's like, sometimes you got to boot them in the hiney. I
Yeah.
think the original line was something like, you got to boot them in the pooty pucker or something. Like, girl, don't blame me for not wanting to say that. That's like disgusting.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. I did. Definitely a comedy. I love this thing. Oh my God. I need more from you guys. I can't wait till this 4-day feature film is made.
Yes.
I will follow you on your socials. Before we let you go, one more time, March 11th, you can get on VOD For Sale by Exorcist, the new comedy horror from Melissa. Before we let you go, please promote what else you have going on that you would like.
Yeah, so I mean, just like follow me at Melissa LaMartina on Instagram, at Aurora_Borealis on Instagram if you're interested in my horror hosting persona, Shocktail Hour with Aurora Borealis. My band is called Beach Creeper. We're on Spotify. We have a full-length album out now. So yeah.
So excited. Thank you so much for coming on, Melissa.
Thank you. It was so much fun.